Good evening, Firebirds, and welcome to the second installment of the Backpack to Briefcase Career Readiness webinar series. My name is Fo Palmer Murphy, the Director of the Office of Alumni Affairs. Thank you so much for being with us this evening, where we will be discussing building your resume. I'm really excited about this collaboration with UDC's Office of Career Services. We are convening a 4-part webinar series on tips and tools to help you during these difficult times find employment or maybe strengthen your employment possibilities. It's just been a great conversation with my colleagues in career services on how to deliver these services to alumni, and I'm excited about it. So this evening, you probably are well within your career and you have a really strong and wonderful resume. But our colleagues in career services, they have opened my eyes to the possibility of my resume, should I ever need it, being used as a marketing document that really communicates my brand. So without further ado, I'll turn the presentation over to my colleagues in UDC's Office of Career Services.
So again, thank you, Ms. Palmer, for extending the invite to the Office of Career Services. It's a pleasure to be a part of this Alumni Career Readiness webinar series. Today, we will dive into resume building and thus the importance of that piece of paper. And for introductions, my name is Katie Ann Jones. As I mentioned earlier, I am a proud alum of the University of District of Columbia, where I obtained my Bachelor's of Arts. And then I proceeded to American University, my master's, and then the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. I'm the current career counselor at the Community College campus. And presenting with me today, we have of Employment Outreach from the Van Ness campus, Mr. Jonathan Niles. And we go to our next slide. Here we have a beautiful picture of our brochure. So our vision here at the Office of Career Services is that every student and alum will achieve their highest level of human potential for success. And what that looks like, it goes directly into our mission statement, which is to prepare undergraduate, graduate students and alumni for career success. And that is attainable through career planning, readiness, and opportunities with employers, recruiters, as well as faculty and staff. So we still continue that Firebird family by extension with our office, but of course, keeping your goals in mind, helping you attain and formulate some career goals. So that's our mission here in the Office of Career Services.
Our objectives today, like Katie mentioned, we're going to be talking about resumes. So hopefully by the end of this presentation, you should be able to develop and utilize resumes appropriately, review the best practices for developing a resume, identify various resume formats, as we'll go over functional and chronological types of resumes, list and describe the essential sections of a resume and what's required and what's becoming less of the norm in resumes nowadays. And then hopefully by the end, you'll be able to construct and implement the best version of yourself, best version of your resume by the end of this presentation.
Perfect, and thank you. So let's go into a quick definition of what exactly is a resume. So we know it's that paper that employers and recruiters tend to ask for, but a resume is a document used by a person to present their qualifications. Think of it as your experience highlight reel. You're highlighting your work experience, whether it's even your academic experiences as well. And a resume can be used for a variety of reasons, but most often they're used to secure employment. We do know that resumes do get into that wheelhouse of higher education applications. So if you're thinking about graduate school, for example, some institution asks for your resume, law school, medical school. So that's just an overview of what a resume is and the utilization of a resume. Now we're going to go in some of our resume basics. What are some of the things that are the foundation of having a good resume, the resume core? Resumes are deceptively complex documents. So as simple as it sounds, we've all heard those unspoken rules. Well, they're really spoken, but oh, my resume needs to be one page. It needs to be one page. But while the finished product may look simple and clean, it very much is a detail-oriented, complex document with a summary of your qualifications, and the process of the writing of a resume can be quite challenging. So I'm starting very early with this plug, but that's why it's very important for you to establish a relationship with the Office of Career Services, in particular your career counselor, because again, we're equipped, we're trained in this area to help you identify, what are the foundational steps, what you need to include, what necessarily doesn't have a place on the resume.
Right, it's a self-marketing tool, probably the best self-marketing tool in your career journey. So, I think that thing that's interesting is on average, employers will take 15 to 45 seconds to review a resume before deciding whether to conduct an interview with you. So you really have to decide, what type of message you want the employer to learn about you.
Great. Good point there, Jonathan. So we're going to continue into the resume basics. So in order to know what to include in your resume, you must be able to answer the following. What do you want employers to learn about you? And if you can recall earlier, when I started to talk about resumes, a good way of pitching it is this is your highlight reel. So what are the things about you that you want to highlight in your education, in your experience, in your skills? When they read the resume, these are the things that needs to jump out. Like, oh, this is a person that I want to be a part of my team because they possess this, that, and the third. And we're going to go, of course, in further detail. But again, the purpose of going over the resume basics is to get your level of thinking in those foundational stages. What are the things that I need this employer or recruiter to know about me? And then, in short, what is the core message of your resume?
So to keep it pretty simple, there are two primary resume formats that we'll be talking to and basing our resume presentation on. Those are the chronological resume and the functional resume. And I'll give you two examples here as to what they are and how they look a little bit different, starting with the chronological resume, which you see an example on your screen right now. Chronological resume is going to go by date of your experience. It's going to highlight the most recent experience towards the top of your resume. And this can be useful in different ways. It's one way that you can tweak your resume by going with the chronological over the functional if your most relevant experience is the most recent experience. Meanwhile, the functional resume might be better suited to highlighting a number of skills, such as you see here in a functional resume example where it highlights the leadership skills, the interpersonal skills. Whichever way you choose to go with, you're always trying to find the best possible way to tie your resume to the specific job experience.
And I'll just plug in here, John, that a functional resume typically, and I will say this in my appointment types with students and alum, if you have experienced any form of employment gap or you took a break, then the functional resume and you're unsure of putting, say, your 2014 work experience on there, a functional resume definitely will be something worth exploring as opposed to a chronological one, just to kind of give more context to when do I apply either one, Mr. Nas or Mr. Jones. So that's a perfect example of when you will typically consider exploring a functional resume.
Exactly. Great example there. Now, just some simple resume formatting for background of all resumes. These are not surefire ways to make a resume. These are just our recommendations, what employers typically expect to see on a resume, and you're guessing at a subjective art. So continue to make appointments with your career counselor and discuss what's best for your situation. But generally, you see a professional type of font that's easy to read. Times New Roman or Arial are the ones that I stick with. 10-point or 12-point font size. 10-point can even be a little too small sometimes, so I try and stay within the 11 to 12-point for the content. Your headers, like you saw in those two examples, can get a little bit bigger. It's okay to go up to 13, maybe 14-point with the section headers, and making your name, you want them to see that at the top of the page. Margins, an inch to half an inch is pretty standardized in the business, and for each experience line, the expectation is maybe 3 to 5 bullets per experience, and that's going to vary based on the experience itself and how relevant it is to the position, obviously. So these are all subjective and have an asterisk next to it. Easy to read, consistent spacing. So you don't want to have too much white space within the resume. You want to have it nice and orderly, organized. You're really sending an implicit message to the employer that you can create a well-constructed, well-organized document by giving them an easy to read and a consistent resume. 1 to 2 pages, that's going to depend on the person, and the context as well. If you're attending a career fair where they're looking at it for 15 to 45 seconds really quickly, maybe a 1-pager makes a little more sense. If you have a ton of experience, tons of research publications, then maybe 2 pages is better suited to you. Just some resume basics. They are all subjective. Make an appointment with us and with your career counselor to decide what's best for your situation.
And now I'll go into resume sections, but just to reiterate some of the resume formatting points that Mr. Niles pointed out. It's also important to note that sometimes those 14 to 15 seconds that are typically scanned, a lot of times they go through electronic modules of assessing resume. So sometimes that's even cut down and it eliminates that human factor. So you always want to make sure that your resume is very concise. Consistency is key. Checking for those grammatical errors too are very important. Be mindful that you're not speaking conversationally on your resume. It's often very easy to get into that track of writing how we speak. And then in the resume, because you want to make this a highlight reel, you don't want to expound upon too much and you don't want to make it too short. But we'll go into that further as we go into our presentation. So now, as we break down the resume, we're looking now into the sections. So the resume construction is very subjective. However, it's following a very commonly used and required areas or sections. And why it's very subjective, you're not going to put every single thing that you have done since you've started working. Some of us have started working maybe from 9, helping grandma out or uncle at the shop. That's not an area that, okay, I need to put it on my resume. Required sections may be renamed to suit your specific needs. As Mr. Niles pointed out, we have the jobs and internship fair coming up. The handshake, you may see a particular employer that's specifically looking for a technical position being filled. Now, you can restructure and reformat, rename some sections to fit an employer needs. That's absolutely fine. There are also some optional sections that should be included that a lot of times we overlook or we don't think it's deemed necessary to include in our resume, and I will discuss that in detail as well. So here's a full overview. Try to add some visual appeal in there for you, so it's not just words in headers, but contact information. This is required. This is a necessity. Who is this resume about? How can I contact them if I see what I like and I want to know more? So your contact information, your objective or your summary, now that is optional. You don't have to include it, but we will go through each section in detail a little bit further on. Your education, that's absolutely necessary, simply because this is how you're going to put your qualifications in black and white that you are qualified on an academical level for some of these positions that you're applying for. If you have any volunteer experience, then that needs to be included as well. Specific experience, which would be your work experience. Certifications, again, these all varies, especially certification varies and dependent on the position that you're going for. If you're going in early childhood education, for example, I do know CPR certification is a requirement. So that's something you want to have listed on your resume. If you're a part of any organization, skills, you've received any awards or honors worth mentioning, that has its own section as well.
So the contact information can look a little bit different in resume by resume. What's included as standards in each resume for the contact section is a name. Like we had mentioned, it can get into a little bit bigger font if you want to highlight your name at the top of your resume. It's usually at the top of your resume, and it will definitely nowadays include an email and a telephone number. Now you see the example here has an address. That is going to vary, and it's becoming less relevant. If you can imagine a day before the internet and before online applications, people would send out hard copies of their resume and would need a return address on them. That doesn't exist as much anymore. Now you can use this subjectively to play in your favor. Say you're from Boca Raton, but you attended UDC and you are applying for jobs in Boca Raton, Florida. Maybe you want to put your home address of Boca Raton, Florida in your resume so you can just be tied towards that area. So there's some unique ways you can play with contact info, but what's really important is that you have your name, your email, and your phone number. LinkedIn URL is a bonus. You get bonus points from your career counselor if you do that.
And I'll add for contact information, and this is something that I typically will discuss in my resume appointments with students and alum. Just as Mr. Niles pointed out, it has become less of a requirement to put the full street address for those reasons, but I also would like to add safety concerns. You know, that's your full address that's being put out there, especially, you know, that job search may look like putting this resume out to 15 different platforms a day because the search is real and we want to get employed, but we have to think about if we put our street address, our apartment number. So just that safety component is also crucial. And as far as the email address, you want to be mindful that you're putting a professional email address. So not hotgirl624, you know, Hot Rod Mustang. No, none of those type of emails need to be on the resume. And I'm also very subjective when it comes to using even your @udc.edu, simply because, and as an alum myself, I knew after a period of time I've lost contact with that email address or access. So you want to think about those things too when you're updating your resume. If you had a resume that you had working with throughout your senior year, maybe in graduate school, and it included your udc.edu, you may want to think about, well, I probably need to create a Yahoo or a Gmail at this time, because if an opportunity does not align itself right now, they may have the resume on file and they send contact to that former email address that you no longer have access to. So just some things to think about when you think about contact information. And then objective. Again, this is completely optional. I often get asked in appointments, well, Ms. Jones, I just want to create a general resume, especially for the purpose of keeping it visible on Handshake. And we'll get into Handshake a little bit further. I know last week you had a full walkthrough of it, but as far as specifically for the resume, an objective, again, it's optional, but the objective is your relevant and clear and concise statement of saying, this is what I have to offer, this is what I would want to bring as an addition to your team. And you want to bear in mind that I know it's your resume, and this seems like tough love to even say in appointments to students, but it's not about you. It's what you can do for them. And you want to keep that in mind when you're writing your objective. So it's all good and well that, you know, you were captain of your sports team, but what are some of the skills and traits that you learned from that position that could be an asset to the employer or recruiter organization that you're trying to seek employment for? So the place of the resume, of the objective, it typically follows the contact information, so it's right there at the top. We've included an example for you here. So seeking an entry-level software engineering position with Google, for my internship experience in programming, cloud computing, and all that could be utilized. Now, another reason why an objective is optional, I often make mention of this as well. You don't want to put an objective that limits you. You don't want to put an objective that causes your resume to have somewhat of a condition associated with it. With this example, for example, it says seeking an entry-level software engineer position. Now, if that recruiter or employer reviews your resume and sees that you have qualifications or skills that are best suited for another position that's not entry-level, then you have just limited your scope because of the objective. So again, just be mindful when considering an objective. And I know we sound like a scratch record at this point, but that's why it's imperative to come see me or your assigned counselor, and then we can have this discussion in detail of, okay, Ms. Jones, I'm thinking about this as an objective. What do you think? And then we can talk it through.
Similar to the objective, the summary is going to be a professional statement showing your qualifications, showing that you're a value add to the company, what you could bring to this position. In this example here, you see some overview of different areas of expertise, 10 years of experience highlighted. So different things that the individual can bring. And again, it is optional, typically found at the top of a resume to try and frame the resume towards a specific experience. Careful with this optional section, just like the objective. You don't want to rule yourself out of experiences if you do decide to include it.
And then your education. So this is a requirement. You're not going to leave out your education, people. You worked hard. You stuck through those classes. Here is its time to shine, right? So if you're a current student, recent graduate, you frequently put your education section at the beginning. I'm seeing new formats where students opt to put the education at the bottom, but it's required. I don't want to say it's not important where it goes, because I do prefer to have the education at the top, but again, there are different templates that exist that has the education listed at the bottom. Sometimes now with these modernized templates, you may see education on a left panel or a right panel. As long as the key thing to note is your education needs to be on there. So your education, what does it include? Of course, your institution, your area of study, include your degrees. I've come across more often than I would like just resumes that have UDC, no degree listed, and UDC is the acronym. You have to write out the University of the District of Columbia, because that's something that I see a lot too on resumes. So just be mindful of that. It is optional to put your GPA. There are certain positions that I know require GPA like cutoffs. So you have to have at least a 3.0. Then by all means, put it on there. You can list your relevant courses under your education as well. So you could put, you know, if you're going for an IT position, if you took advanced, I don't know, information technology courses, you can list that there. If you've done any study abroad or any special projects that's relating to a position, that's what's key. Is it relating to the position that you are going for? And it goes back to even the definition of resume that I outlined earlier. And this is where a simple 1 to 2 pager becomes this intricate document, because you're not just throwing everything on there. You have to be strategic. You have to be deliberate. You know, it's pretty much personalizing. It's almost like you're writing a personalized love letter, so to speak, every time you go for a job, because you're not putting everything on there. You're putting things that are specific to the positions that you're applying for. Oftentimes, though, unless you're a recent high school graduate or there is some relevance of putting your high school on the education section because it may carry some relevance to either the position or the employer. High school is typically something we advise against including in the education section, but again, if there is some connection that is, of course, beyond my knowledge that okay, if I put that I went to Woodrow Wilson High School, it will work out in my benefit. But it's something typically now we don't see very often on the resumes on the education section, especially if you're already pursuing your higher ed degree and we're presenting to alumni. So I do believe you've already completed your UDC degrees. Just having that listed is fine.
Again, shameless plug for the career counseling team. Go see them and work out some of these questions, how you can tie your education, how you can talk about your GPA. If you don't leave it on your resume because you're maybe not as confident in it, it's free game for an employer to ask you about your GPA. So be prepared for those questions and schedule an appointment with a career counselor to talk about how to answer those. The next section in the resume, the experience section, this is the meat of the resume, if you will. It's where you highlight your job experience, your work experience, your volunteer experience, project experience that you could have done in classes. Oftentimes people rename this section to work experience, or relevant experience is one way to, again, tie the most relevant experience towards the bottom or towards the top of your resume, since they are typically reading from the top down. Look at the job description and try and tailor your resume to the specific job description in this section. Use those action words, action verbs at the beginning of each bullet, describing those experiences that we'll get into later in the presentation, but tie it to some of those tasks that the job is describing that you have to do within the job that you're applying for.
And before we get into skills, I would just like to add a little bit more onto experience, just because, again, I'm really presenting this workshop with appointments in mind. And we just came through a very heavy caseload of resumes because we are preparing for the upcoming jobs and internship fair. And I say this to say, please note that the experience, work history, whatever you want to title it, it goes in reverse chronological order. So it's what your last experience is and then to your least. Now, if you have an experience that is, we're in 2020 now and it's beyond 2015 or older, please schedule an appointment for us to go through and review and reconstruct. Not to say if at a given appointment with me or another assigned counselor, they say, oh, you can take off your 2013 work experience. Please note, when we advise or encourage the omission of something, it's not the total discard of it. We will redistribute it somewhere else, or we will take those transferable skills learned and they can be in its own subsection. So that's just another, point that needs to be driven home with experience, that even if you have worked in a field or an area for 2 to 3 months and you don't think it's relevant because, hey, COVID happened and it just completely cut the job short, it still needs to go on the resume. You want to keep your bullet points too at a consistent number. Oftentimes we see in the experience section, you have one position that may have 8 bullet points, and then you have another one that has like 3. That reads as you like one job more than the other. That's not necessarily the case. Sometimes too, you make that mistake of writing every single thing you've done in a job, from I opened the store at 5 to I straightened the clothes on the hanger before my lunch break. Not everything that you have done is qualified to be listed as experience. So that's where those action verbs come in, and how you make your experience stand out from the very first beginning, very first line, very first word. It's not, I opened the store, responsible for, or distributed. Those are some of the words that you want to use, and we will definitely provide some examples later on. But I just wanted to emphasize a little bit more on experience there. And now we go into skills. Yay! So skills are optional. It is listed as optional, but it's often one of those questions that you get in an interview. Tell me about yourself, and i.e. that includes including in your response, what can you do? What is included with skills? Skill section may include technical, research language, industry-specific skills. I always like to use technology as an example because that's a skill that oftentimes gets used. But I want to point out that you have soft skills as well that I often see get omitted from resumes because we often think in that critical, technical type of mind frame. And employers want to know as well, are you an active listener? That's a skill that is a soft skill. Are you a good communicator? Those are skills you want to include as well. Not to say don't include I'm proficient in Microsoft Word and Excel, but I'm also saying to make your resume more well-rounded, you want to include some soft skills with your hard skills. And your hard skills are like your technical skills, your research language. We do have language skills listed here, and it could be in the skills section, but I'm seeing now in more current templates where languages is being listed as its own subheading. So you can do that as an option where you have language as its own subheading. I know the slide here says you can put language, which it helps because if you are proficient in multiple languages, that's something that, of course, you need to highlight. But just know that you can have it listed in skills section, and you can also create it in its own subsection. Similar to how we have certification, it can be a section for languages as well. But it is optional. I would recommend it though.
Fantastic. Some overlap here with maybe the other sections that we have before mentioned, but sometimes resumes will include other sections at the end of your resume, such as student involvement or volunteer experiences are sometimes included at the bottom of a resume. Any way that you can highlight different skills that you learned or different things that you can bring to the table can be listed towards the end of a resume, such as student organizations, certifications, honors and awards, volunteer and service activities. That doesn't mean to say that if you volunteered, part-time, 20 hours a week at an organization in the summer, that could still be included under the experience section if you wanted to highlight that higher up in the list. But if you wanted to highlight volunteering that you did at the end of your resume, you can do that as well. So just a brief overview of some of the other sections.
And then let's go back.
Sure.
I won't stay long, I promise. But
no, you're good.
In organizations, I often get asked, well, Ms. Jones, I wasn't president or nothing. Listen, you don't have to hold office. Once you're a member, it will be listed as member of said organizations. So and this is where that renaming of sections becomes valid. Because you may not want to name it student organizations. Again, you're no longer a part of the organization, and it may be that you're a part of a professional organization or society. So one more plug. Schedule your appointment with your career counselor, and we can talk about how to help you rename your sections and how to include it. The same applies for volunteer hours, how to quantify that sentence structure. So if it is part-time, you could say a recent edit or comment I gave a student was helped with clothing donation seasonally with the Red Cross, with American Red Cross. So again, these are just highlighted statements. And when invited in for an interview or contacted maybe for that initial telephone call, if an employer recruiter wants to know more, then they could say, tell me about your seasonal contributions to this organization. But Just wanted to point that out because that often gets misconstrued that I wasn't president or vice president or treasurer, so I don't think it's important, but it absolutely is.
Exactly. We can get into some more of the grit of resumes now. I'm showing here skills that are desired by employers based on a survey that was recently done by a professional organization known as NACE, or the National Association of College Educators. These are the top 16 skills that employers are seeking on their resume. It's going to vary by field, obviously, but I think this is really powerful to point out because it alludes to Kadian's point that, you know, employers are looking for a mix of the soft and the hard skills, not just that technical skill, the ability to use programming, but also the ability to work within teams, the ability to communicate effectively. So make sure you have a plethora of both mixed in throughout your resume.
And then this is my favorite part, the action verbs, because this is what keeps us in check when we want to veer off into conversational speak, when you know, we kind of get lazy in the production of our own resume, because and to be quite frank, and I always outline this in the beginning of all my resume appointments, it's very hard to talk about yourself. I get it. And here's a document solely designated to highlighting the best part of your work experience and, you know, your academic success. So action verbs are very important. So instead of saying I cashed customers out daily, you know, that lacks strength and clarity. So then another example we had listed here was held weekly status meetings to share client updates. Snooze fest, doesn't really say much, but you wanna have that pop appeal. You want to make your resume scannable, so to speak. So when they scan it, they pick out some words like, oh, spearheaded. Let's see what they led. Spearheaded weekly status meetings to communicate agency revenue growth. And I can even expand on this some more. I'm sorry, I'm treating this like a session. You can even expand on that some more by adding some quantifiable components. So if you spearheaded weekly status meetings, you may want to put that you had a 80% positive response to your meetings. We've categorized our action verbs here for you, and a good resource for this, if you're not plugged in to them as yet, is the indie.com blog site. And they have an action verb list that is similar to this, that's categorized for you. So if you needed some help on, well, I did a lot of communicating in my job, what are some words I could use? I was very creative. What are some words that I could use? So that's, and I didn't want to bore you and read the word for word, but just so you can amp up some of those descriptions of duties and responsibilities under your work experience. It should never read vague, and if you want it to read plain. Oh, look at me rhyming, vague and plain. Keep that in mind. You don't want it to be vague and plain. You don't want it to be vague and plain. You want it to pop and you want it to attract. Okay, I don't rhyme anymore, but you get it. If you launched anything, you know, if you created anything, designed anything, that's pretty much how you want to think about action verbs. So, and again, schedule an appointment with your career counselor and we can help you to pinpoint some action words. And a best practice that I do in appointments for this, because it may not be as simple as, oh, Ms. Jones said I needed to add an action verb. A best practice that I personally utilize is to have students and alums tell me in conversational terms, well, what did you do at this position? And just by sharing what they did, more relaxed, and saying, well, you know, I was in charge of doing surveys for Uber drivers to make sure that their vehicles were good. And I was like, there is your responsibility right there. You know, conducted daily survey of the Uber vehicles. And it's like, oh, so that's why it helps to have this space, this environment, and this is what we love to do. So please utilize us.
Use us as collaborators in trying to develop the best quilt of your professional resume. And I think a final note on action verbs. These are the words that come right at the beginning of the bullet points that describe your experience, and they insinuate a skill. They can be past or present tense, depending on if you are currently doing the job, you evaluate, or if you previously had done the job and you no longer do that job, you evaluated. So that is one note that action verbs should be.
That is great. That is a good one, and that is a key one.
I got your back.
Right. See, teamwork. That's it. But that is a very key one, because if you have a work experience or history listed in 2018 and it's still reading as evaluate, so you need to keep tense consistent. So if it's past tense, then you need to keep past tense consistent.
It's easy to miss these things, and we don't attempt to overwhelm you with the information. There's a recording of this if you do want to backtrack, but meet with us and get a second set of eyes, because I still go through my resume today and I'll notice little things that I missed. And I work in career services, so it's okay, but collaborate with us. The bottom line of resumes is investing your time and energy into making this document the best that it can be. If you actively engage and you're personally involved in the creation of your resume, you can take ownership over your career and the journey that you're taking. I think it's a pretty cool document that resembles all of what you've done. Ask for help. I think we've hammered that one home pretty hard. Is just get professional assistance. You have the opportunity to. UDC is a pretty unique school in that we offer you the opportunity to meet with us even as alumni. We offer you the opportunity to access our Handshake career management system to connect with employers even as alumni. And our hopes is that you'll market yourself successfully. You'll sell yourself and your skills and your experience to the highest degree, because that's what you deserve. You deserve to be valued for what you are worth, and we see you as worthy Firebirds. So we want to make sure you know how to access some of our services. As we wrap up here, I'm going to pass the control of the screen over to Katie, so she can walk you through accessing this UDC Handshake system. So you'll want to remember this link, udc.joinhandshake.com. And I'll pass it over to you now. Stop sharing.
Yes, Palmer, if you could give me access to share my screen as well. I had asked earlier, but I don't think you had heard me.
I got you. I got it to you now, I think.
Okay, great. So, as Mr. Niles pointed out, we kind of beat that point to death, but I'll beat it some more. Schedule an appointment with your career counselor. And just a quick way of doing that, there are multiple ways of scheduling an appointment, but I'll do a quick demo walkthrough of Handshake real quickly. And I'm sure this was reviewed last week with the walkthrough, but seeing that we are going on resume specifically, okay, we're not doing WebEx. Can you guys see my screen? Is it saying Handshake? Yes, okay. So it's important to note, you have to type in udc.joinhandshake.com, because even though we would love to take rights for Handshake for ourselves, it is a career management system that is utilized by other organizations, institutions, and you have the single sign-on capability with your udc.edu. So that's also important to note as alums, that in order to utilize our services, you would need to activate your Handshake account by logging into udc.joinhandshake.com. Then it takes you to your single sign-on. If you no longer have access to this, then I would recommend contacting the IT department, because if you sign up, because you do have the capability, I'm going to be honest with you, you can sign up with Handshake with a Gmail and a Yahoo, but what's going to happen, won't be getting any OCS services, because Mr. Niles, as well as our other coordinators, they're the ones that, vet and approve, and that's one of the sure tell signs that, okay, we cannot work with you because you don't have a udc.edu activation email. So once you go into Handshake, this is what your homepage looks like, and I'll move four screen out the way. So this is what your homepage look like. And again, we pointed out our jobs and internship fair, so I'll just make another plug for that, pay some advertising bills. You can go to events and search for jobs and internship fair right here. But if you wanted to go directly into schedule an appointment with us, let me take you back to the home screen. You can either do it here in this top bar by clicking Career Centers here, or you could click it here. And what it does, as the name suggests, it connects you with the experts, and you can schedule your appointment here. So you can click to schedule. And then once you hit schedule new appointment, it takes you through, you're a student or an alumnus, and then it's pretty self-explanatory. You will go through it that way. Now, something else I'd like to show you as well that you have access to through our services in the resource tab. If you wanted to say brush up on some things before you meet with me or my team members, you can hit resume, you can find templates here, you can find the verb list we talked about right here, you can find a whole guide here. So then this just takes some initiative. If you don't do that, that's absolutely fine too, but I know I have some strategic analytical type of person in here that like to take that initiative. And you may already know that you have some things to work on, just sheer off what we've already gone over. So you do have the resource library at your disposal. And then I'm gonna toss the baton back over to Mr. Niles.
I think I lost ability to share. If you could click my name on the top right, Katie, and then make me a presenter again. Oh, no, I got it. Thank you.
Okay, good.
I'm sorry.
It's a relay. We going back and forth. That's my track person back out here. There's a 4x1. And here we are. So this is your career counseling team. So we didn't just want to plug in and hammer it to you. Request an appointment, and don't give you the information of who to request. Even though I would love to see you all, I am designated at the community college. So if you attended the community college, then I am your point person. If you majored in CAS or in those areas, then Dr. Sandstrong would be your career counselor. And then if you are in Cs or SBA and causes, this is not listed here, but Mrs. Wilson is also the career counselor for causes at the moment. Thank you for joining us. Stay connected with us. Even if it's not just to schedule a resume appointment, we do have other appointment types that exist. And you can find that information on our website as well. We do review and reconstruct with cover letters as well. You know, if you're at this stage where you've graduated in an area, but you found out that you have new interests and you wanted to know what are some of the career opportunities that exist. We also provide career assessment tests, inventories. We provide career information. We assist with the search and application process. So really and truly, as our vision and our mission suggests, we really are here to assist in any way possible towards you attaining career success. And that's career readiness through career planning and also opportunities. And you've already graduated, so you may be like me, you want to go pursue another degree, whether it's a second master's or a doctoral degree, law school. We do help with that process as well. You can download the Handshake app, the red one, because they have two. So the red Handshake app, as you see here, and you can follow us on social media for more live updates.
think that's it. Thank you. Yeah, we'll pass it to you, Ms. Palmer.
Thank you so much. And to everyone who's on the webinar, please forgive me. I'm in this wind tunnel in my office. So if you hear this background noise, I'm sitting right under the air duct. So please accept my deepest apologies. The one thing that maybe you touched on, did you guys touch on like cover letters and the importance of cover letters?
We did not.
Yeah, and the reason I say that, because I served on a hiring panel, and the panel that I was on, everyone on the panel, they were really focused on that cover letter. Many of them saw the cover letter as that first introduction to your writing skills, your writing ability.
Absolutely.
And so I can't remember the name of the system we use here at UDC, but when I would go into it, I saw where some people just skipped it all together. They didn't do a cover letter at all. So could you just quickly share with everyone on the webinar, like, is it still a thing? Is it still important to do a cover letter? And again, I learned so much serving on the hiring panel. It really does highlight how well you can write or not.
It absolutely does. And I will backtrack to answer the first part of the question. Is it still deemed relevant, or does it still carry importance? It absolutely does. And we didn't present on it today because we've solely focused on resume building. Again, within our services, we do have a specific resume type tailored to cover letters, where similar to this resume session, we have a breakdown module of what to include in the cover letter, revamping some of the traditional practices that we tend to know that no longer, not to say it's not important, but it's no longer being deemed relevant by employers. But they do want to see not only your writing skills, but the cover letter is also that document that some of the things, going back to my point earlier, if a career counselor, myself, or my team members might say, let's eliminate that from the resume for now. Here is another place that we can transfer some of those skills, which will be in the cover letter, if that makes sense. So if you had a duty or responsibility that stated, you are responsible for the successful launch of a project, because of keeping your document concise, referring to your resume, the cover letter now gives an opportunity for you to expound upon it, and not only expound upon it, but directly link it to the job that you're applying for. That gives you that space to do it. So it's not just a document that oftentimes is misinterpreted as, I'm just going to copy and paste the stuff from my resume, put it in here, put sincerely at the bottom, and call it a day. No. And that's why it's important to meet with us, because sentence structure is important as well. It also gives them an inside look of what this person's personality is. There's so much that can be taken from a written document. And we don't look into cover letters enough, but it's definitely still important, because what is not conveyed on the resume, the cover letter, is that next document that employers and recruiter will go through the fine-tooth comb. And it even adds more to say, if you had a functional resume, for example, here is another opportunity for you to elaborate and expound upon, hey, I may have had an employment gap based on my resume. I may not have told you that, but you can obviously see I don't have a traditional resume to say I've worked from this job 2019 to 2018, but the cover letter could show, while I was taking XYZ course, I learned this, and this is how I can apply it to your job. And Mr. Niles pointed this out. Always keep in mind, not only for your resume, but for the cover letter, the job description and what they're asking for. Because this is another place you're going to plug in those keywords that they're looking for.
I think what stood out to me listening to you speak, Katie, is the word opportunity. I really consider a cover letter as like an opportunity. And if a job description suggests that a cover letter is optional, if you don't do it, you're missing out on an opportunity to showcase your writing skills, showcase how much of a perfect fit you are for the job. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I like to use, when I'm not working in Firebird Nation, which is like never, I like to use the cover letter to convey my passion. And I'm telling you, this isn't something I learned overnight. I had to cultivate that talent. And it came with serving on hiring panels, attending a lot of webinars like this. I'm like a webinar geek. And I've seen so many samples of cover letters that just knock my socks off. And I'm like, well, mine doesn't sound like this. Like, I really want to show a potential employer, not only, that I can write, but I'm passionate about it. And I tend to, list those passions, those things that set me apart. I really want to thank you for this conversation tonight. Thank you so much for highlighting the importance of volunteer service. I cannot tell you how much that helps in building not only your resume, it builds your voice, your passion, it builds skills, but it also builds your network. There are times when you find yourself volunteering for the executive director, of a nonprofit organization, and you may very well have interactions with this person, and that executive director could have a wealth of connections that they will gladly provide opportunities, open doors for you. So don't sleep on volunteer service. For us living in Washington, D.C., there are so many organizations right now that need our help. And if you have the opportunity to go and volunteer and do it on a consistent basis, for me, I live in the great Ward 8 in the illustrious community of Commerce Heights, where we have a campus on MLK Avenue. I'm really proud about that. It's like I can walk to it. But I volunteered a lot in my neighborhood, and they really prepared me for roles in leadership. So I really appreciate this presentation, the conversation. Everything that you shared was just great. I'm sharing right now on my screen the next webinar that'll take place next week on the 14th at 6 p.m. We'll be talking about building your LinkedIn profile. And I'm excited about this because Rodney Trapp, who is the Vice President for Advancement for UDC and the UDC Foundation, he's going to lead the discussion. I'm going to be a part of it as well. But I'm really excited about, him bringing his experience and how he uses LinkedIn to communicate his expertise. So this is really going to be a treat. Just really quickly, because we are like right at 7 o'clock, so we've done very well on time. We have the LinkedIn webinar coming up on the 14th, and then we're going to be discussing navigating career fairs on October 20th, which is timely because on October 22nd, the Office of Career Services will be convening its Jobs and Internships Virtual Fair. That information should be in your inbox, but if you go to Career Services website, they have the information there. It's actually in your handshake. And also, I wanted to let everyone know that we will be celebrating. We will have a homecoming, a virtual homecoming. It'll take place November 8th to the 13th. We'll be celebrating the 50th anniversary of the graduating class of 1970. So I'm too excited about that. We're going to have a virtual dance party for the class of 1970, but we have a lot going on. So those announcements will be coming out as well. Anyone interested in volunteering, please email me at alumni.udc.edu. I can use your help in pulling together Homecoming 2020. And this is our season of giving. We are currently in the combined federal campaign, and we have our CFC number on the screen, 13321. So for my alum who are in the federal workplace, that is the way the federal government helps you to support your worthy causes. And for those DC government employees, we have the DC One Fund that starts next week. On December 1st, we will do Giving Tuesday. So please, if you're saying to yourself, look, I just learned to build my resume, what is she talking about? I totally understand. But if you have friends, family members in your network that can support UDC Foundation, it really would be appreciated. The one thing that we do here is we really support our students. And during this shutdown, during COVID-19, the need has been tremendous. I'm so happy to say that the Firebird community has stepped up, and the UDC Foundation has created a student emergency fund that is assisting students with rent payments, cell phone payments, groceries. We're doing all that we can to keep students in school, so your support is really appreciated, and it is put to great use. We also will be, some folks are getting in the mail, the donor pledge card, and that's appreciated as well. And then one tactic escaped me. I do apologize. I'm seeing a lot of folks create like Facebook campaigns where you reach out to your Facebook network, so your Instagram network, and you're asking them to support UDC as well. So however your creativity inspires you to ask your networks to give, please know it really would be appreciated. Thank you everyone for participating in this webinar. Thank you so much to the Office of Career Services for this partnership and collaboration. I look forward to our next webinar on the 14th. And again, we're going to be talking about building your LinkedIn profile. And then on the 20th, that will be the final webinar in the series where we're talking about navigating career fairs. So I look forward to our future conversations. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great evening.